Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with your friends. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And yes, even though it's only a couple days before Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you're celebrating this year, if you need that last-minute present, it might arrive a little late, but be sure to pick up a copy of Play Noir Anthology, 41 film noir-styled one-act plays in one compendium for your favorite playwright, actor, producer, director. Be sure to pick up a copy on Amazon. My guest today's works have been produced nationally and internationally for multi-generational audiences by a fusion of professional theaters, academic stages, and non-traditional spaces. She has received commissions and development from the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the Kennedy Center, South Coast Repertory, Indiana Repertory Theatre, the Playwrights Center, the Skirball Foundation, Geva Theatre, Seattle Rep, ACT Theatre, Orlando Shakes, the National New Play Network, Hedgebrook, the New Harmony Project, and Banff Playwrights Lab. Her plays range from satire centering on underrepresented historical figures to contemporary interpretations of mythology, intimate dramas, and exuberant, innovative theater for young people. Her plays are published by Dramatic Publishing, Playscripts, Concord Theatricals, Smith & Krauss, and Rain City Press, and include Not Medea, Junie B. Jones is Not a Crook, and Judy Moody Stink, The Mad, Mad, Mad Treasure Hunt. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Allison Gregory.
Wow.
Glad we got through that. Thank you for coming on.
I want to meet this person. I forgot that I did all that.
Well, there's a lot of people are going to want to meet you as well. So there's a lot to unpack. And so I kind of want to start with just I guess we'll call it your genres, satires and underrepresented historical figures, contemporary interpretation of mythology. I mean, there's so much there. And so let's start with the underrepresented historical figures. Yeah. And how you approach that and how much creative license or what's the research behind it? How do you decide? And then what's the process?
Boy, you're making it sound like it's an organized decision making, and it is not at all. Boy, there's no one starting place. There's a lot of happy accidents is how this generally happens. My most recent play that I'm working on is, for instance, about Martha Mitchell, right? 1970s. Watergate figure. Okay. And I don't even remember what I was researching, but I was researching something or someone else, and had heard her name. I came across her name in doing this, and I'd heard her name, but even though I was alive, I was very young during all of that, and I wasn't really paying attention to that. But I remember all the Watergate stuff being on TV all the time, on the news all the time. It was sort of culture was saturated with it, but I didn't really have the information on it. So I just started, digging around, going, who's this Martha Mitchell, and why should I care? And I mean, she's amazing, and the history of Watergate and all of that, but also just in her own right, she was a really fascinating woman and very contradictory and troublemaker. She's a troublemaker, and who can resist a troublemaker? So, sure.
So what was her connection, real quick, if you don't mind me asking? Because I'm learning, as I always do when I do these podcasts. So this is somebody I'm not familiar with. I'm not even sure I know the name.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't, and that's again why I was interested in her. She was the wife of the indicted former Attorney General for Richard Nixon, John Mitchell, who was to his dying day, stalwart, loyal follower of Richard Nixon, and who helped cover up the Watergate break-in in 1974. Martha Mitchell she's what would have been called at the time a society wife. Okay. She was very, very much in the news. She was fascinating to the media because she was completely unfiltered. She was a Republican. She was a loudmouth. She was a very divisive figure, again, because she was unfiltered. She just laid it out and said it. And I think also she was kind of refreshing to the media because then you wouldn't know this because you're way too young, but the Nixon administration.
I was alive, but I had no idea what was going on. Maybe I was watching the news. I doubt it.
Yeah, but she was kind of the opposite, the polar opposite. The Nixon administration was very buttoned down.
Sure.
They did not share a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And she was just out there. She was just saying everything, which for a while was entertaining for the administration. And they actually tapped her during his presidential campaign. They tapped her to get out there and talk. We like you. The people like you. Oh. But when Watergate happened, that had a very chilling effect on the obviously on the Nixon administration, and they didn't want anybody talking about anything, and they especially didn't want Martha Mitchell out there, saying what came to mind, and so essentially she was kidnapped from a hotel in Newport Beach, where she was waiting for her husband, who had quickly flown to DC to try to clean up the mess that was Watergate before anyone knew what Watergate was. So that very first, within hours after the break-in, the administration said, "We need you here," to John Mitchell, her husband. "We need you here. Get here now. Do not bring your wife. Do not tell anybody anything." And so she was left in this hotel room and held prisoner there by one of John Mitchell's bodyguards. And it's just, that was just the beginning. It all sorts of things unraveled. It was really, really ugly, really traumatic. Okay. And the reason I find her so fascinating is because she did not hold to the party line.
Right.
That is such a different dynamic than what we have now, right? And so that just, I just was hungry to read about her and then to write about it, and there were just some wonderful parallels between, and differences, obviously, between what's going on now and what was happening then, and the parties became very, very great divides between the parties and all that, and she was the only person who said, "I'm not going to keep this secret. I'm not going to try to, make this, I'm not going to spin this. This is what happened is bad. And it's bad on the Republican Party. It's bad on Nixon." It was fascinating and ended badly for her. Obviously for John Mitchell, was the first indicted and jailed, he held the highest office of political office of anyone who'd ever been jailed and all that. So really fun. But she was also really funny. And so it was just a delight to write. And it's new and hasn't still workshopping it, still playing with it. I cannot wait for this one to get out there and set off some fireworks.
So once you've done your research, approaching this from a playwriting perspective, at what point, because obviously there's so much to cover, which you can't cover everything. How do you decide on the framing? And what I mean by that is like, what section to focus on? You know what I mean? What section is the important that's going to tell the story, or do you write it all and then go back and figure out where to focus now that you've gotten everything out? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a little of all of that. I think that, again, with Martha Mitchell, I didn't know the whole story. So I kind of had to write everything from beginning to end in terms of that period of time of Watergate. But then, there were other parts of her life that were interesting to me, both forward and backward and sideways, kind of. So I just started pulling more things in and shifting information around, shifting the focus around. I mean, that particular play, it's a one-person play, so the point of view is pretty steady, you know. But with a play like I don't know, like Not Medea, that was a play where I started writing one thing that I thought I was writing, and I thought it was a completely different thing. And as I started doing more research on the Medea myth, what became interesting to me was not the Medea story that we're all familiar with about Jason, in his quest for power, marrying the king's daughter when he's with, Medea, and abandoning her and their children, and her doing the infanticide number and all of that. Yes, we all know that story. But to me, what was interesting was the backstory of that mythology earlier. What led to her and Jason coming together? What led to them leaving the country that she was from and him bringing her to this new land where she was an other, and everything that meant. And while doing all that, also sort of reading a story in the newspaper about this woman who lost a child in a very dramatic way, and who was ultimately held responsible for that by the community. She was proven not guilty in the legal courts, but her neighbors, her people who knew her, they all never trusted her again, and so she was ostracized and all of that. So she might as well have been proven guilty in a court of law. That story found its way into my sort of retelling of the Medea story. So it became very much about a contemporary woman doing battle with the image people have, the assumptions people have about what kind of parent are you, what kind of wife are you, what kind of person are you. And I didn't set out to do any of that. Right. I was just curious about the story, but it led me to all these other threads that I kind of wove into one really impactful play, impactful story, I should say. To me, it was an impactful story. Hopefully it's an impactful play.
So is this a new one as well then?
No, Not Medea premiered, what was it, in 2016 at Contemporary American Theatre Festival, and then it had a rolling world premiere through a National New Play Network, and then it's been done around the country. It most recently was done in Turkey, apparently.
Wow. Going back to the Watergate play, you said the one thing that jumped out at me with that, you said it's a one person play. Now, does that mean it's one character, or is it one performer playing multiple characters, or is it just a retelling and not retelling, but situational things and reactions to whatever the situation might be for that character or for her at the time?
This particular play is one character in kind of telling her version of what happened. We don't necessarily know when she is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
She's telling about, the factual story of what happened both before, during, and after Watergate.
Where's she set at this point? What's the situation that she's retelling the story? Is this? She's
at their Watergate apartment. Which they lived at Watergate. Yeah. And actually she's there. She's also, so that was in DC. Then she's also at the hotel in Newport Beach, California, where she was held captive for 5 days by the bodyguard. And then she's also at their New York City Fifth Ave apartment where they lived after.
And I'm assuming this is just a play where there is no fourth wall.
Yeah.
What made you decide to go in that direction, opposed to I'm going to quote unquote, for lack of a better phrase, reenact what you imagine these situations to have been? I know that this person was involved at this particular point. You know that the bodyguard's in there with this. So why not, why go with a one person perspective opposed to here's the scene in the apartment where she's kidnapped, and what's the situation where, like, is she trying to negotiate getting out, and why are you doing this? Is she trying, you know what I mean? So because there's so many different directions you can go, but you've chosen this one. So I'm just kind of intrigued what made you decide to go in that direction.
Well, isn't that kind of, as playwrights, what what our main task is when are we? Not where are we, not why are we, but when are we? That to me always launches the story. And I say that always launches the story. It's not necessarily as tidy as that. Like, it may take me a few scenes into it to realize, oh, this is when I am. This is when I want to be. Yeah. So I think that's always an instigator for me, is when is this story? And two things on that. When is the story that she's telling, but also when is the life that she is in right now? And that sounds a little abstract, and I'm not sure how to break it down any better than that.
No, it makes sense. I mean, so interesting.
So we don't find out when she is until the end of the play. Okay. Even though she's telling a linear story about what happened. Okay, that was another question, because I know that you said up, down, and sideways. So that when you had said that, I'm like, okay, are we jumping back and forth? Are we going back in time and coming back to the present? Are we, so it is the linear story then. That's okay. Fascinating. Yeah. And then taking on not Medea. Yes. Why not Medea? Why? Touche. Tell the prequel rather than we're going to, because again, here's the story that nobody knows, and why not write a prequel that's set, in that time, opposed to I'm going to take everything that I've learned, but we're going to be now, which is when are we? So what made you go that direction and say, okay, well, we're now, opposed to before Medea? Yeah, and there's no wrong answer. I'm just curious. I'm fascinated on unpacking this when are we kind of a thing, and deciding to go in this direction, and what's the catalyst behind that? Yeah. So with that one, I think that I did not necessarily go into it thinking I am going to be in the time, the ancient time of the myth. Like, I had no interest in that. Mm-hmm. I felt like Euripides did that pretty well. He can have that. What I was interested in was, what is the impact of that story on a character today? And so what are the parallels? What are the intersections? What are the major distances and differences? Right. And so I wanted to start on a character who was now. And as I wrote that story, and it started out with this monologue, and what that monologue came to inform for me, what it came to inform me about was, oh, this character desperately does not want to go to know anything more about Medea. She does not. She wants to stay as far away from that story as possible. Why? What's her problem? Why doesn't she want to? There's the story is a threat to her. The story has too many parallels. The story could be her story. And again, didn't set out necessarily this way. I wanted to sort of tell a contemporary version of Not Medea. But as I was doing that, I did come across this story in the newspaper about this woman who was being ostracized by her community for this event that happened. And to me, that brought out all these parallels that I had never ever sort of seen before in the Euripides Medea story, based on the myth that yes, this was this woman who was other. She was not really ever embraced by the community. She was not accepted. She was not integrated into the community to begin with. And then this thing happened with her husband, where she felt even more abandoned. And then this other thing happened, or did it happen? And in this woman's story, in the Not Medea character story, she was fighting perception, just in a very different way than Medea was fighting against perception. So there are parallels, and then there are distinct differences, and trying to find the drama in that, and also the kind of electrifying connections in that.
Right.
That was my task. That's what kept me coming back to my computer, or actually my yellow ledger paper, which is I always write longhand.
And is that outline, or is that the actual dialogue as well?
James, I always start out to write by outline, and I never get very far because I get too hungry to start writing the scenes. So I write my whole play in longhand. For better or worse.
Sure. No, I love the when are we, because it's kind of like, it's a different approach to how does this affect the play, where other people is like, well, if I change the setting, how does this change the play? Where I don't know if a lot of people really take a what happens if we change the time? Not even the time, like, because it's not just that.
It's the whole context.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think we've all, seen and written or tried to write plays based on some famous, dead playwright's play that we tried to, bring its relevance into today. Right. And, sometimes that works, and sometimes it's a complete disaster. It's always a good lesson, though. I think it's a really good exercise to try to do that. And with the Medea story, as well as I mean, a number of my other plays, it's just an attempt to get a new lens on an ancient problem or an ancient conflict, because no matter how ancient they are, we're still grappling with all that stuff, right?
Yeah. What advice do you have? Because I'm assuming that from what you said so far, I'm gathering that you kind of let the story find you.
Yes. Yeah.
And so what advice do you have for playwrights that this is how I have to write this. This is what I have to write, where it's just like, you can't really, you have to let the story find you, rather than trying to push something that maybe that's not the play you're supposed to be writing right now, that you can keep doing it. But if you keep finding it, keep being pushed in this direction, what advice do you have to give in and not resist that?
Well, it's the advice I have to give myself, right?
Sure.
I
Right.
mean, for every play, every time I sit down to write a play, I don't know how to write a play. So I think that, I mean, the best advice is just write what you can,
Right.
not necessarily what you know or what you want, but what you can. Um, uh, there's there's just no straight and narrow blueprint or process for any of this.
Right.
And so, the way you characterize it and say that I wait for a play to find me, that's a good way to look at it. I've never looked at it that way.
Mhm.
I'm just um, uh, uh, trying to distill what
Right.
it is I think. That's what writing a play is to me. I'm trying to distill what it is I think, because I don't really know what I think.
Right. Right.
So if I find an interesting, fascinating character, or a story, I'm not really what I would call an issue writer. That doesn't really. I don't know how to make a story out of that.
Right.
My Some of my plays do have to do with issues, but I that's not what sent me down that path. That just sort of came up as I wrote the play. Whatever that play is,
Right.
it's a matter of me being willing to not know for a really long time, but to keep writing towards something
Sure.
that will that will basically keep entertain me for the next 2 or 3 years,
Right.
however long it takes me to write it. That's the challenge.
Sure. Well, I find that the characters are much more interesting than the issue to begin with. You can have the issue, that's fine, but
Yeah.
how does that issue affect the characters? I think that's a much better place to focus.
Yeah.
You know.
Or how do the characters affect the issue?
Yeah. Yeah.
Either way. My husband, Stephen Dietz, who you did a marvelous interview with,
Oh, God bless you. Thank you.
that was terrific. And he and I have such different approaches to playwriting. He's got a process that's he's much more outline oriented. He's much more story oriented. All of that. I get impatient. I like a play with a lot of story. I get impatient if I go to a play and it's just about feelings or it's not going anywhere. I want that story, but that's not how I approach it as a writer. I don't approach my craft as I must have this story. I approach it through my characters.
Sure.
What's happening to them or what they're trying to make happen, depending. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Since you're writing long form or longhand, do you not edit as you write? You just get through it and then you go back and delete things like, I don't need this, or are you going like, or do you go back the next day and like review it and say, nope, I'm going to rewrite this because I don't know. I'm just curious how you approach it, since you don't have a screen that you can move the cursor and cut that right away, or do you just let yourself get through the whole entire thing and then go back and start?
I like to write with a sharpened number 2 pencil.
Okay.
And that gives me a little bit of an out. Like, it doesn't feel as permanent as pen. Oh, wait.
Okay.
Hold on. I got to turn my mail just made noise. Go away, mail.
Oh, technology.
Yeah. I don't know how to do this.
That's okay. If it goes off again, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
we're
right.
gonna be good.
Okay. Anyway.
Our audience will just have to deal with it in case it happens again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 2 pencil, sharpened. It gives you an out.
So I guess I tell you that just to say that I don't want to feel like I'm writing something important, so important that has to be
Mm.
right. It has to be, I have to, you know, the sentence has to be perfect. So the pencil just makes it feel a little bit more ephemeral, and that's okay. So I just keep writing, and I write badly sometimes. A lot of times it's bad. I just want to keep going forward. I want to edit as little as possible initially. I just want to write, you know, just throw the kitchen sink in there. Just write it all. Just write it all. Just write it all. The next day when I come back, and you know, the reality of what I've done the day before, I have to contend with and look at my notes. And then I will either, you know, do some editing, do a lot of editing on my legal pad, and I'll just keep doing that until I'm okay with it, and then I will move forward. And the goal is to try to just keep moving forward, even if I'm not exactly happy with whatever it is I've written, to just keep moving forward, because chances are I haven't yet found what it is I'm writing. Okay. And I won't find it until I keep writing.
Got it. So when you take that break, when you stop the one day and then you go back the next, are you going in knowing where you're going yet? With the ideas like, okay, I know where I'm at, and then I know where I plan on going. And so my question to you, if you do that, but you still go back a little bit to edit some things, do you ever find yourself in a place where like, oh, well, crap, that just changed everything, because now where I intended to go and I've made this change, now it's like I'm going over here now.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen to where you've like, oh, everything that I had intended to do today is out the window because I just made these changes, and that can change everything?
Yeah, but I try to salvage what I can, like, which is probably just like, you know, grabbing onto a piece of floating driftwood when I'm in the Atlantic Ocean. You know, I wish I could say, yeah, I just let all that go and went forward. No, I try to salvage as much as I can, to make it, you know, to convince myself I didn't completely waste the, you know, 6 hours the day earlier.
But no, I don't mean it like that everything that you've written, but it's just like what you had planned for the day is like, oh, well, I just made these changes, and where I intended to go, I'm going over here now all of a sudden because my characters told me this is the direction we're going now. Towards like, that's when I say that's the part that's out the window. What you had sat down, you intended to sit down and do, is now different because of edits.
Yes.
And I know that can happen.
Yeah. And you know, I actually prefer that. I know I'm on the right path if my mind gets changed.
Sure. Okay.
Because if it's not, if I'm trying to stay on the straight and narrow, chances are the writing is going to be flat. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to do is just execute an idea I had rather than let the idea carry things. I've sort of made a decision rather than growing something.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but
absolutely.
Also, when I get a certain amount of pages, then I let myself go to the computer and start putting it all into the computer, and that can change things, you know, tremendously. But oh God, yeah, 9 times out of 10, I can't tell you how many times I'm changing direction, changing focus. Yeah, it just, again, that's the exciting part of the challenge and the danger of writing without an outline.
Okay.
You're kind of seat of your pants writing.
Yeah, I can't do outline. I can't do outline, and I can't do at least as far as screenwriting goes, I can't do the 3x5 cards. I can't do note cards.
Oh yeah. Because
I just don't. I can't just be that specific and like, this is what happens in this scene. Like because I don't know what's going to happen in this scene. I mean, I have to find out what's going to happen in this scene, you know, before I can really get there, you know?
I mean, it's nice to have that if you're that kind of writer. Again, I think Stephen is very much that kind of writer. He knows what's going to happen in a scene. But I think if you're not that kind of writer and you try to write like that, going, I should be more disciplined or whatever it is, my experience has been, it's going to flatten everything. It's going to flatten everything.
Yeah.
You can use it as an exercise and see if it takes you to a different place, a different point of view, throw in a new color or a new voice. But I don't think there's necessarily a better or a worse. You're the kind of writer you are. Right. And you don't know what that is until you start writing and start either hitting walls or scaling them. And that's, I mean, I have those robotic vacuum cleaners. Mine's called an Oofy, right? Okay. And it has a bumper on it. I guess it has sensors on it. And so it's kind of going across the floor and it's like, yeah, I'm picking up all this, pet fur and all of this. And then it crashes into the leg of a table and it goes, oh, no. I gotta. And so it starts turning and it goes in another direction. And then bam, it hits a bookshelf and I got to turn and that's how my writing is. I mean, it's not, there are a lot of days when it is not pretty and it is certainly not eloquent. And it can be frustrating. But that does tell me that I'm working, I'm building something here. Sure. I don't necessarily have a solid blueprint for, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going till all the dog hair is off the carpet. That was so many metaphors, but
no, it's great. Yeah. But no, I think that's great. It's kind of like going back to what now I really understand when you say I don't know how to write a play. I just do it, And I think playwriting is a little bit different than screenwriting, because I don't know if you can. You've got Save the Cat, and I bring this up every once in a while on different episodes, and that's different, because it's a formula. It's a formula on how to write. It's not necessarily successful, but what. The formula that people want to purchase, does it have to be 90 pages? No. Does it have to, does this happen to have to happen on page 5? Does this happen to happen on page 25? We're playwriting. It's like you can read a book on playwriting, which is why I do the podcast, because everybody as playwriting goes is going to have a different approach, and that's not to say one way. It's like almost as if somebody wrote their own book on playwriting, because they're going to have a different approach and they're going to have a different way of success or a different pathway to success. And it's just like, I hope that this is a way to resonate, with somebody who might be finding those struggles. I mean, the best piece of advice I ever had with a filmmaker when he was at AFI was, I'm like, well, what about Save the Cat? What about this? Like, he's like, read the books and then throw it out. And I think that's what you have to do with playwriting books too, is because you're not going to, I've read a couple and I'm like, I don't know what this means. I don't know how to apply this. And I suppose it's like, take what works for you and then run with it, whether that's starting with character, whether that's outlining your characters and knowing everything about them, whether that's outlining the story, whether that's starting with dialogue and figuring out what it works. And, I don't know. I don't know if there is a right approach, but there's a great, that's another approach that you're talking about that we just haven't covered. And it's great.
Yeah. And I think that same with reading other playwrights, not just how to playwright books, which are helpful, but reading other playwrights. Sure. And reading the ones you like and then try to write a play like they write.
All right. Okay.
I think that's a great thing to do, because you will never be able to write a play like they write it.
Right.
But you will be able to write something that captures your essential voice, which is ultimately what you're trying to do as a playwright. You're trying to essentialize your voice, your thoughts,
Right.
and tell your story in one way or another. And so I think that reading plays that you admire, or work by playwrights that you admire, again, steal from the best, because you're never going to be able to duplicate what they wrote. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Total switch, because I'm curious. How many Junie B plays are there? Because I noticed that in one of the bios I was looking at, I noticed I think it had listed 3.
This is a terrible answer. I don't know if it's 3 or 4 or 5. Yikes! Wait, 1, 2, 3. So I just opened one at Orlando, formerly Orlando Repertory Theatre, just changed the name to Orlando Family Stage. A fantastic theater in Florida. They've done a lot of my plays there, and they commissioned another Junie B. Specifically, he wanted a Halloween, that time of year, kind of fallish play. So it's Boo and I Mean It, based on Barbara Parker's series.
Based on
the Junie B. Jones series by Barbara Parks. Yeah. The late great Barbara Parks. She's an amazing person, and just
forgive me, and I don't know, just for our listeners' sake as well, that may not, I don't know, I'm not quite sure who Barbara Parks is.
So she is the author of the entire Junie B. Jones series, book series.
Okay, got it.
It's a book series. There's 34, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, she passed away in 2013. Just an amazing person, and the best sense of humor. And I just adore those books. I used to read them to my daughter when she was little, and no one could make her gut laugh like those books. And so it's been a real pleasure and an honor to be able to take on those books. Just it's my happy place.
Okay.
I would love to adapt every single one of them into a play. I don't know that people are that I'm going to get that many offers to do it.
Okay.
But the stories are so well written, and I take 2 of the books and smash them up and make them talk to each other and become one long play. But yeah, so I can't believe I don't know how many I've written.
No, it's because again, I don't. So I'm not looking at it like as I go through it, and again, I don't do a lot of research when I talk to playwrights, and the reason being is because I want this to be natural, and I want to I don't want to plan anything.
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with Junie B. Jones. So in my mind, I'm like, you've created this character, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, are these sequels? And if from a playwriting perspective, you're relying on, well, did they see the first one, and are they going to understand this one if they haven't seen this one? So these are standalone stories about one particular character. And are these children's books, or are they young adult?
They're children's books.
Okay.
She is, depending on which part of the series that you get into, she's either a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, kindergarten or first grade. And she's just got the best voice. She's irreverent and a bit subversive, and she doesn't speak correctly. She doesn't have, the exact right grammar, but I believe that she speaks the way children think.
Okay.
And I just think the stories are so well written. They're just a delight, and also kind of an education for me when I take a couple of them and turn them into a play. And this came about it was a while ago, 2009. David Starr, who was the artistic director at Child's Play in Arizona, just one of the world-class children's theaters. He knew that Barbara Park lived in Arizona. He knew how popular the books were. I'd never heard of them. I had a 5-year or an 8-year-old at the time. And so he turned me on to the books, and I just ate them up. And when he said, "Do you think you'd be interested in writing them?" I was like, "Please, yes, please let me." So she and I met up, and she was just a consummate writer. She was very disciplined. She knew exactly everything about these characters, and each of them that are in the book series. There's Junie B, who's like the main character, and then there's her circle of friends, and there's some adults, teachers, parents, grandparents, gatekeepers, and the bottom line is Junie B is a young person navigating the world, and as is often the case, she is kind of her own worst enemy. So to me, the book series, her conflicts are moral conflicts. Mm-hmm. There is, how do I get what I want? Excuse me. How do I get what I want without killing someone? Which is, I mean, how did we all get through childhood and young adulthood without killing ourselves or someone? You know?
Well, I say that for anybody who grew up in the 60s, 70s, or maybe even 80s, I think, I mean, we, as a latchkey kid, I think we were up, you just fend for yourself. It's like, it's like, yes. We were left alone, it was like, how can I use this that I've just discovered to hurt myself or my friend, yeah. Whether that's like bicycle ramps, whether that's BB gun fights, it's just stupid things. And I just don't, I think that children nowadays that, it's
different.
Yeah. It's almost like they live in a Nerf world.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I think that Barbara started writing those books in the 90s up until she passed too young from ovarian cancer into the teens, the teen aughts. And the world was changing and all of that. But I think that there's just such a fundamental truth in the way she writes children that is it's its own empowerment. It's just fueled by such authenticity, and that is what is so fun to delve into with those books. Is they feel real. She's a comedic character. There's some outrageous things that happen, but it all feels so authentic to me. So, and we're at various times we've been turning it into either a TV series or a movie. And I don't know where we stand on that now. Okay. There have been so many false starts. So we'll see if it happens. But if it happens, I'm grateful because I get to be kind of in the driver's seat, thanks to Barbara, just kind of turning the keys of the series over to me. How
did that work licensing wise? Or rights, as far as rights go, did she just give you carte blanche permission to adapt all of them, or was there, while she was around, was it like, yes, I did it, and then was there like, here's a royalty fee for letting me? How did that work? I'm just curious, not to, just from the business aspect. If anybody like, oh my God, I'm so inspired because there's this series and I would love to do that with this as well. And, I'm just curious how that works and how to approach it.
Yeah, I think it's different for every project.
Sure.
I'm right now in negotiations with Penguin Publishing. They're an arm of Random House, and I had adapted this Astrid Lindgren story. She wrote Pippi Longstockings and all of that.
Sure.
And so she wrote this other one called Romeo, the robber's daughter, which is a little bit more obscure. And I got permission from her estate to turn it into a play, which I did. And then publishers came and wanted to publish it. And it was like, great, yes, please, let's get more audiences, expose this story to more audiences. And it's been a heck of a time trying to get it published, because the publishers have this rule of it has to be 20% playwright and 80% from the original material, from the author, the story. Wait, am I saying that right? No, vice versa. They want it 80% new from the playwright. This is Penguin.
Right.
And 20%, we can only use 20% of the original material. Well, when I was writing the play, I was working very closely with the Lundgren estate, saying, okay, here's the draft. And they'd say, no, it has to be, it has to be more following the story, more following the book, more following these exact words more. So there was a real push and pull of me trying to assert my vision for a stage version, which is very different experience, right? Than reading a book. A book is internal. A stage experience is external.
Right.
It's different, and you have to adapt it differently. And you have to make shit up, right?
Yeah.
You just do.
Yeah.
So that was a very prolonged struggle, but I finally was able to come to agreement with the estate and get that happening and get it in the voice that I needed to assert to make it a viable stage play. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to now, publishers want to do it, but Penguin, who had published the original story, said, no, you can't, this play sounds too much like the book. You have to change it.
Well, that was the point.
Exactly. It's like, no, I had long, hard struggles with the estate, saying you have to use this word here and you have to use this sentence and you can't make that character this. She has to be this and all of that. Now the publishers want me to turn around and completely jettison all that and make it more of my original voice.
So you have to abide by when I say you can't shop it around to any other publishers to give you more creative control, because they're the ones who did the original.
You have to go through the author's publishers. The publishers that I have now who want to publish it as a play, that's separate. That's a separate publisher.
Oh, got it.
You've got the book publisher and you've got the play publisher. The book publisher is the final whatever. Actually, not true. Over here, you've got the estate of the deceased writer, and they are the final, authority on it. So luckily, they stepped in and talked to Penguin and said, no, we like the play she's written. That play has to be published. We don't want it to be changed into what you're talking about. Right. But I mean, if they hadn't stepped in, then no, Penguin would have said, no, you have to write a whole new play. It has to be different.
Well, why would you want to do that when it could be the catalyst? Like, oh my gosh, I loved this play. It was so great. Now I want to go back to the source material and see what's changed. And now you might have made some new sales.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a question, James.
Well, yeah. But what about the Junie B stuff? How did that work? That's where I'm interested. So now that she's no longer with us, that's why I said, did you have carte blanche, and how does that work? Yeah. Especially because you're combining things and yeah.
Junie B was its own process because I had never adapted anything before that. Right. So I didn't really know what it entailed. And what I found out kind of, trial by fire was Barbara Park knows that character and that world inside and out. Right. And it's ultimately a very theatrical world. And so I worked extremely closely with Barbara on the initial play. I mean, if I had a question, if I needed to meld a scene together, if I needed a transitional scene, if there was anything that wasn't in the books, I had to contact Barbara and say, okay, I'm thinking of doing this. Do I have your blessing? Or I've written this exchange between these two characters that's not in the books. Is this okay? And she would change a word if need be. She would say, well, that doesn't sound like that character would sound from the books. That doesn't sound right. And I'd have to go back to the drawing board.
Okay.
So that was for the very first one. Then once that book came out and the play, to my great delight, did really well and got done a lot. And so then when we came to Barbara and said, we want to write another play, she was cool with it. But then she got ill and passed away. And then suddenly I had to do it myself.
Right.
And I didn't know how to do that because I was so used to her talking in my ear, like every step of the way, holding my hand and saying this and this and this, which I think would drive a lot of playwrights crazy. And it did drive me crazy at first. I was like, where am I in all of this? I don't even know. I feel like a cipher now.
Yeah.
The thing that did was it hammered Junie B's world into my head so firmly that when I finally did sit down to write the second one, I felt like Barbara was right here. She was in the room with me in a good way.
Sure. Yeah.
I could still make stuff up. I could, do whatever I needed to do to make it stage worthy. But I trusted the voice that I was hearing.
So do you have permission to do all of her plays now, or all of her books now, if it really came down to it? And you was that an agreement you guys came to, or?
I do. I'm very, very grateful to her. And this came unexpectedly. The week before she died, she met with her lawyers and they drew up a document that basically said, no one can write these stories unless they go through Allison Gregory, and she is either the head writer or consultant or whatever on it.
God bless her.
That was, absolutely. I was completely unexpected, and a godsend, and frankly smart, and because her family wanted Junie B to continue being out in the world, because there weren't going to be any more books.
Right. So
by Barbara giving that to me, it enabled Junie B to continue to live in the world, to find new audiences, because after, I think it was again 2012 or something, 2011, when the last book came out, there's no more Junie B. So I was very grateful for that. What was I going to say to you? Something about this whole process. Before Barbara passed away, she was approached by everyone: Disney, Pixar, Nickelodeon, all of those guys. They wanted to make movies, TV series, and she just kept saying no, no, no. And I'd be like, Barbara, this could be very lucrative. But she did not trust anyone with that material. She didn't trust what they were going to do with it.
Right.
And the fact that then she would trust me with it, after knowing all the no's that she had said before that, I just can't tell you how humbling that was.
Sure.
And a vote of confidence. So since then, her family has come to me and said, if someone wants to make TV or a movie out of that, we will consider it, but we won't let it go forward unless you're involved. So,
all right, there you go.
been a couple of things. We'll see what happens. That's a whole different world.
Sure. Yeah. Well, no, 100%. I get it.
Yeah.
Going back, I'm just out of curiosity. Going back to the Penguin Publishing one.
Yeah.
How long until that? I know you got it settled, so good on you and good on the estate. But hypothetically, how much time would have passed before that would have been public domain and you wouldn't have had to deal with Penguin anymore?
A long time.
Oh.
That's such a good question. Because that book was written well after Pippi Longstockings. That book, I think the copyright on that is 80, like mid 80s or something, maybe late 80s.
Okay.
So it would have been a while.
Right.
While. Yeah. That National Copyright Day was just last week. Do you keep up?
No, I don't. Is it fascinating?
Duke University comes out every year. It's on December, I want to say 16th or 15th, something like that. Maybe it's the 15th. Every day. That is National Copyright Day. And that is when the yearly new materials, and it includes movies and radio and television and film and everything. That is when the list of newly eligible copyright items come out, and you just go to Duke University and you can look that up and find out, all the stuff that's been released, all the whatever, Agatha Christie and all of that, all the famous authors and movies.
Does that mean that Hollywood just hovering over that list, just waiting and then seeing what they can gobble up?
Yeah. Ugh. I think a lot of people jump on that list every year. They're just waiting.
Wow. Start following it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you and outside of the Junie B and the other play that you wrote based on different material, do you write I know you do some children's playwriting as well, or do you have your I don't, it's the only way I can phrase it, and I don't mean it to sound if it's
I know.
as an insult. I'm assuming that you've written your own material as well, not just source material from people that you're inspired by, correct?
You mean for my children? No.
For you, yes.
So for children's plays, I've written 2 original.
Okay.
2? 3? The third one is I did my own Peter and the Wolf.
Okay.
But usually my children's plays have been commissions, which can often come with a certain requests tied to it, meaning we want this character, we want this story, we want this book, and I blame the parents. Parents don't want to take their kids to something that isn't tried and true. It's true with movies a lot of times. That's why all the sequels, right?
Right.
And it's true with plays. They don't want to take a roll of the dice on a new, like not real. That's what they call it. That character's not real. I've never heard of that character.
Oh, of course, because there's.
Okay. Well, like Charlotte's Web isn't real either, but
at least at one point it wasn't, and then guess what? Somebody wrote it.
Exactly.
So okay, go ahead.
So in answer to your question, most of my adult grown-up plays are original plays.
No, of course.
But most of my children's plays are adaptations or inspired by the source, like a Red Riding Hood that I was commissioned by Seattle Children's Theatre. Courtney Sale, wonderful artistic director. She's now at Merrimack Rep, but she was at Seattle Children's Theatre a couple of years ago when she commissioned that. And her criteria was needs to be a known title, needs to be in the public domain, meaning they don't have to pay royalties, and needs to be 2 characters only. And needs to sell a lot of tickets. So, that's
on them, not on you.
That was the request. And she and I talked a lot about it and just thought, well, okay, if it's public domain, then we're talking mythology, we're talking fairy tales, or we're talking all that stuff. And one thing led to another, and we ended up deciding on Red Riding Hood, which ended up it's a 2-actor Red Riding Hood.
Right.
They play all the characters. That ended up, all of those constructs ended up being kind of a fuel for me. Like,
sure,
the gauntlet is thrown. Okay, how the heck do I do this? And it ended up, what to me was not a very exciting, idea, which was, Red Riding Hood. Okay, great.
Right.
It ended up being a blast to write because of all the constructs on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So going to your original pieces for children, do you take a different approach, or does the same approach apply that we already discussed earlier? Is like, I don't know where it's going, we're just going to have to find out, or what's different when you sit down and you know that you're going to write a children's piece, an original children's piece?
Yeah.
How do you does anything change, or is it's just like any other one?
There's no way I can go into it without being aware of the audience with a children's piece, because you're writing for a much bigger audience when you're writing a children's piece. You're writing for whatever the intended age range, but then you're also writing for their sibling, their older or younger sibling, who the parents are going to drag along. You're writing for the parents, you're writing for the grandparents, perhaps they're taking them. You're writing for the teacher because they're going to bring schools in. So you're writing for all these gatekeepers. So you are writing for a much bigger audience. And I take that responsibility really seriously. Like,
sure.
I've been a parent. I know the agony of taking your kid to a play where, people are jumping around in furry suits, and singing inane songs. And I don't want to write that play. I want to write a play that is going to entertain your 7-year-old and is going to entertain you as the parent or the teacher. So it's a bigger audience. It's and so just that right there just kind of shapes my mindset. But in terms of writing it, I mean, it's the same in terms of, I don't always know where I'm going. If it's an adaptation, obviously I know we're going to
100% sure. Yeah. And that's why I was more curious about your original stuff rather than an adaptation, because obviously you have a blueprint.
Yeah. No, I don't necessarily.
Right. Okay.
Where I'm going to end.
I can respect that, though, about not wanting to do something with, because it's like, sure, is it entertaining to them? Sure. But do they identify with it? Probably not. I'd be more intrigued to try to write something that they can identify with. It's like, that's me. I know how to that, I think that's why I was so fascinated when I was a kid with Oliver Twist. Seeing Oliver on a field trip, which was I think it was like in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And they didn't hold back. They didn't I don't think they took the whole Bill situation out to try and protect us. It was there, and it's funny because it's like, I never realized that I wanted to act. Even when I saw that, I'm like, oh, wow, I wish I was up there. I wish I could do that. Yes. Not knowing that I really had an interest in it. Just didn't click until high school. I just thought that was what other kids got to do.
Oh, that's wild. But there
So
was, but it set the spark, kind of it, you know.
Yes, so no, I just said even in junior high school and in high school, it didn't click. I mean, that was my falling into acting was just a complete accident. Even though I would reenact movie scenes at school, you know, when Flash Gordon came out with Sam Jones, I was always reenacting certain scenes from there, but it didn't click because again, the kids that are on stage, that's something they get to do. I'm never going to have that opportunity. So I never voiced it. And it wasn't until I got kicked off my high school radio station for saying orgasm on the air that I had to go find a new class. And the only reason I went into the drama class was because I had a crush on a girl.
Isn't that true? Like the unconventional path you take to end up in the place that you belong.
Yeah. And then it was like, oh, I did want to do this, and it is accessible. So on that note, where did the playwriting for you come into play? What made you sit down and?
Well, I have to tell you, I am your same story.
Okay.
Except I was an actor. First, I was a dancer. I danced in junior high and high school, just ballet and jazz, modern, just, sort of concert dance and whatever. I never thought of it as a career or anything like that. I just liked to dance and had a little bit of talent at it. And in college, I ended up being asked to go to the Utah Shakespeare Festival as a dancer on the green. And then that was like a whole other world, like actors were there. And I would watch these amazing actors doing Shakespeare and all of that. But I never identified and thought that is what I want to do. And I certainly never thought of writing ever at any point. But eventually I did, as a dancer, start to get cast in roles that had speaking, and eventually became an actor. And so was an actor for a very long time. And I was, and happy being an actor. I wasn't looking like to do anything else, but I started doing a lot of new plays, and I was doing a new play at the Denver Center, and, got really close to the playwright there, wonderful playwright named Neil Bell, and just was doing a play of his, and he was a great guy. And we would talk about that. Again, never thinking, oh, I want to be a playwright. But I was back in LA, and I was driving down to South Coast Rep to take an acting class there, I think a couple times a week or once a week or something. And I really enjoyed the acting class. And when I signed up to take it for the next session, it was all full. I was like, oh, I really like coming down here. I like the people. I like the place. And so I said, well, are there any other classes I can take? And they said, well, there's a playwriting class. And I said, well, okay, I'll take a playwriting class. That'll be fun. And John Bloor was my teacher. He was the literary manager there. And he was one of my early teachers, and I just ended up like, oh, I like this. I like this a lot. And again, I just did it because I liked going there. I wasn't like, I didn't plays. I didn't have this is for me sort of thing. Right. But once I started writing in that class, I just caught fire, and it was just like, I got to do this. This is what I got to do, to the point where I was like, go away, acting, go away.
Yeah, sure.
I kind of needed the acting because I was doing a lot of commercials, and that was sort of paying for my playwriting, or my, like, I got to keep my house. So I'm not making any money as a playwright. So I need to keep doing this acting thing. But it, now it seems like there's such an intentional path if you want to be a playwright. There's college courses, there's grad school, there's really phenomenal workshops and all of that. But for me, I wasn't aware of any of that. I didn't know any of that. I just stumbled into it and then just started writing plays, which I don't necessarily recommend unless you are like, I don't know, a trust fund kid or something. It's you won't start making a living for a long time.
Well, I think that's also, when I say that, it's not a side gig, but it's I think in that regard, if if you're not following that pathway, it's a long haul, but it's not. It has to be a hobby first. It's got to start somewhere, and then you just keep doing it, and then hopefully you'll have some success.
Yeah.
I think everybody has a different definition of success. Where was I going to go? There was something he said that I was like really intrigued by, and then I lost it. But what was your first success? Like, when did you know, playwriting from a playwriting standpoint? Oh, and that's where I was going to go. That's the question I had. Well, go ahead and tell me that, and then I have the other question I was going to ask.
Okay. Wow. What I called there were two. Neither of them were financially very, viable, but to me, they were the two things that gave me the validation. Yes, you should be doing this. Yes, keep doing this. Right. The first was the first play I wrote in that workshop got selected as a winning play by in this South Coast Rep playwright contest.
Okay.
And I won a commission.
Nice.
And some money to write another play. And that was like, I didn't think about playwriting in terms of, and now you're going to receive some money and then you will write another play. I was just trying to live through my first play and make it to the end of it. Right. So that was real validation. That was, you've written something, we're interested in your voice. Here's some money, go write something else for us, which I was unable to do. I did write something else, but there was no way I knew how to, at that point, write something for them.
Right. Okay.
And it was really a struggle because I thought, I don't know how to do this at all. And I just realized at that time, I didn't realize it. It wasn't until much later that I realized if you like Geva Theatre once commissioned me to write something for them, but they had all this material for me to pull on in terms of, here's books about Rochester, New York, and here's books about the industry here, and here's books about famous people who've lived here and all of that. So that gave me tangible things.
Sure.
What South Coast Rep was saying was, and this is not, I'm not bad-mouthing them at all. No. I think they're a marvelous, marvelous theater, and they've helped me and they've done my plays, and I'm forever grateful to them. But when they're saying, write us a play, I didn't know, and I still don't know what that means.
Right.
I know how to write the play I know how to write. Unless you are specifically telling me, write a play about a family that is... Give me some parameters. Yeah, exactly that.
Wow. Okay, and so what was the second thing?
And I will just say, I just want to finish that thought.
Sure.
So I ended up writing a play that never in the history of South Coast Rep would they ever consider doing it. I kind of went like polar opposite, because that's the play I knew how to write at that time.
Right.
Anyway, so there's that. The second one was, again, David Starr, my first children's play that I'd ever written, which was, I think, maybe my third or fourth play that I'd written. I wrote, it's called Even Steven Goes to War. It's about a young Eurasian boy. He's half, well, Amerasian, I guess. He's half American, half Vietnamese. He goes back to the Vietnam War. It's set in contemporary times, but he goes back to the Vietnam War to find his grandfather who disappeared. So that's the story. And it was a children's play, and I didn't know anyone in the industry, and so I just sent it to David Saar because he'd written a beautiful, amazing, one of the best children's plays I've ever read, The Yellow Boat, about his son who died. His son was a hemophiliac. He was getting a blood transfusion. He was 7 years old. He contracted AIDS, and he died. And he wrote this amazing play about his son dying. And I thought, that's children's theater. Children's theater can do that. And I wanted to do something that I cannot ever compare any play I've written to that play. But but I wanted to write something like that. So, excuse me. I am talking a lot.
Very good. That's why we do this.
You know,
It's not about me. It's about you.
So he read this play that I'd written, and he wanted to produce it. No, he didn't want to produce it. He wanted to take it to the Kennedy Center, to their New Visions, New Voices program, and workshop it. And then it would be seen by, all these other artistic directors of children's theaters. And I mean, it was such incredible exposure. And then after we did that workshop, he committed to producing the play. So it was, I don't know how long into my writing, maybe 4 years, 3 or 4 years into my writing. It was my first professional production.
Wow.
And it was amazing. I mean, and it was one of those rare situations where he wanted to do the play I had written, and he wanted to do it how I envisioned it.
Wow.
And they did just a beautiful production, which was directed by my husband, Stephen Dietz. And he did a magnificent job. So both of those situations were both artistically really satisfying, because the people who validated them were interested in my voice, were interested in what I had to say, weren't trying to make the play anything but what I envisioned it to be. And I think that's rare.
Yeah.
And more rare.
Yeah.
I think a lot of plays get taken away from the playwright. And I am not advocating for being an asshole playwright and saying, no, this is how I've written it. It has to stay like this. I don't mean that at all. I think when the real work begins is when you go into production. That's when you really start finding out what the play is and what it isn't. And that's when you need to start doing your rewrites, and you need to work. But hopefully whoever is, doing your play has enough interest in what you've written already.
Sure.
And enough respect for that they want to keep that authentic quality and voice.
Sure.
Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask, which could be a fun one, because I'm curious, because you were starting you were playing around with playwriting for a little bit.
Yeah.
You were still acting. Did you do your own work? Did you cast yourself in your own plays?
Oh, no, never.
Good for you.
Never. Isn't that funny? I cannot think about myself in any of my plays. And in fact, Ed Herendeen at Contemporary American Theatre Festival wanted to cast me in my play Wild Horses, which is my other one-woman play. And I said no. I can't, I don't know, James, I have to take myself out of the equation.
Good for you. Yeah.
I think if I were intentionally writing a play for myself, it would be so narrow because I'd only want to write the things I do really well.
Right. Sure. Fair enough.
So yeah, what about you? Have you ever done that? Like, could you, or do you want
No,
to?
because if any, so, and again, it's apologies. I've brought this story up a zillion times. So you did Hollywood. So, when I came here in 2000, LA theater had a bad rap, a really terrible rap. And what I discovered, or what I think I discovered, which is nothing new, was it was actors that decided, I'm going to write something for myself and I'm going to star in it and I'm going to direct it and I'm going to produce it because it's going to showcase how wonderful I am, but you're not a playwright and so you suck. And so more often than not, I'm like, so when I started doing Play Noir, which is it's all the book that we talked about a little bit ago, it's all film noir started one-act plays written by playwrights from around the world. And I would have actors that were part of the group that had been performing with me for a few years submit. And if it was good enough, I'd consider it. And so there were a couple of my actors who did write some pieces, but I have one caveat, or it's two caveats. You can't direct it and you can't be in it. So if it's good enough to get in, I'll produce it, but you're not going to be in it and you're not going to be directing it. And so, no, I couldn't do it. I'd much rather take the royalties for something that I've wanted to do. If there's a role that I really, really want that's already been written, I would get the rights to that and put myself in it. As a matter of fact, that was the first thing when I first started producing with my ex. That's how I came to know Stephen's work, because we had produced a series of one-act plays that were a friend's cousin had written them, and they weren't bad, they weren't terrible. And once we did that and we decided we wanted to produce again, I'm like, she's like, let's produce something professionally written. And she's like, I've always wanted to do Stephen Dietz's Private Eyes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. So she knew what role she wanted to do. She read it. I read it. She thought I'd be good at, in the role of the director. And we were going to ask my friend Adam to direct us, but he read it. He's like, I'd rather play the husband. And so we got another friend to direct it for us. And we held auditions for the role of Frank and for the director's estranged wife. So, and that was the first play that we produced. It was professionally written. And then the following year we did Nikki Silver's Private Eyes. Nikki Silver's the Maiden's Prayer. I'm looking at this poster right now. So when we end this, I'll flip the camera around and I'll show you the posters that line the walls that you can't see right now. So, but I've been blessed enough to have both Stephen and Nikki on the podcast. So anyways,
Nikki Silver, he's a wonderful writer.
Yeah.
Theatricals was the last one I saw at Coast Rep. But
oh, really? Wow. So to answer the question, I could never write something for myself. I'd much rather do I'm still learning as a writer. I have a lot more to learn. I'm getting there, but I'm also more screenwriting than I am. There are a couple plays that I do. I did write a one act, and I do have a full length that I've been working on. And then there's another one that popped into my head, like, this is going to be great, but it's just, I have the problem of not sitting down.
Yeah.
Writing. I give into resistance more than I should. So, and I'm like, well, I focus on the playwriting podcast instead. So,
well, I hear you, and I do think that first step it's a massive step.
Yeah,
and it's a big commitment, and yeah.
I also need to do retreats more often. I need to just book a hotel. I love going to Cambria. I love going to Monterey. Those are two places where I've sat down and forced myself to just write, just get it going. And it's been successful. I just need to do it because I can't write at home. There's just too many distractions.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I hope you do that.
I need to. It's about that time, so we'll see. We'll see one thing at a time, I suppose. Where can people find your work?
Oh, let's see. Where can they find my work? My plays, several of them are published. So, and the usual suspects, Sam French, Playscripts, Dramatic Publishing, Smith and Krauss, whatever other ones there are. Productions now, I'm usually the last one to know about any that are currently running unless it's a premiere. So
sure.
If you find out anything that's running, let me know. And then new plays coming up. I have something coming up in Seattle. I think, though, it's not going to be till January of 26. It's a company called the Seagull Project, and this is my first sort of tango with Chekhov. They commissioned this piece where I took a Chekhov short story and kind of had my own way with it, and was so intimidated because I know nothing about Chekhov.
Yeah.
And I think in this case that really helped because I could really just sort of take it and run with it in my direction. So
nice.
So that production is coming up. But mostly just, I just need to do what we just were talking about and sit down and write the next one. I'm doing an adaptation of a very obscure, I don't even know if I can call it an adaptation anymore. I think it's more based on, because I've sort of deconstructed it a lot, based on an obscure 1913 novella called Trent's Last Case. And it's a murder mystery, and it's just a hoot. And I wanted to do it specifically because it's story driven. And I'm so keen on character driven things. So to challenge myself, I thought I'm going to do a story driven thing. And my brain hurts, just hurts, but it's good for me. It's a new muscle, trying to write something that is so laid out story wise.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Congrats. Good luck on that. And then finally, are you on the socials?
Just reluctantly on Facebook. Kind of.
Okay.
I have to keep my brain sort of my own, and and I find socials very influencing in a way that isn't inspiring.
Right.
I don't want to be judgmental, but So you can find me on Facebook, and I'll respond to you. I also have a website out there, Allison Gregory plays.com.
Great.
But where can I ask you what theater did you do the Nikki and Stevens plays at? Same theater, different theater?
No, so we did Private Eyes at the Raven Playhouse on Lancashire in North Hollywood.
Yeah.
Right down by the down the street from the El Portal. And then we were going to do Maiden's Prayer at that theater as well, but the theater owner at the time he was a little spacey, and he wrote everything in this little book that he carried in his pocket. And so we were getting ready to do it, and he's like, I don't, that's booked, that time's booked now. And we had already paid for the rights and all this stuff. And so scrambling. And we were like, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? And we went down to the Actors Forum. It's on Magnolia.
Yeah.
And so we went in there, and this lady, Audrey, she's a little older lady. And I don't know why I always made Audrey always talk like this. She always, she reminded me of that lady that always had the cigarette in her hand. And she's like, well, let me read the play. And so we put a deposit down. Didn't hear anything. Didn't get we dropped the contract off or something like that. Something to that extent. And she's like, or maybe we didn't do the contract, but we put the deposit down. We didn't hear anything. I'm like, Audrey, what's going on? We haven't heard from you. What was the play again? It was The Maiden's Prayer by Nikki Saville. Oh, that's right. That's the play when nothing good happens to anybody. And I'm like, okay. Next day, we get our deposit check back. And she's like, well, you never turned in your contract, so I'm not giving you the theater. And I'm like, so we're scrambling around, and we went down the street, Lancashire, Camarillo, and Vineland. Next door, a couple doors down from Little Tony's, is the Actors Workout Studio.
Okay.
And we went in, and I met Fran Montano, who ran the space at the time. And he, luckily, it was available. The space was available. We produced it there. We went into tech, unfortunately, and I had already done a play there a long time ago. It was a series of one-act plays. It was written by this playwright, Chad, that was in a playwriting workshop. But anyway, so went there, and the interesting thing about Actors Workout Studio was it was carpeted. The stage was carpeted, and it was really to make the shoes a little softer, to where they wasn't clanking and clicking about, if somebody was wearing heels or anything like that. So that's why he had to carpet it. So we went into tech this weekend, and we walked in, and the previous production had spilt black paint all over the carpet on the stage. And then somehow they had walked through it and then tracked footprints across it. And so we're just like, had to call Fran. I'm like, Fran, I don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. And he's just like, and so he wound up replacing it with hardwood floor, but he had to do it because we opened that following week.
Oh my God.
This was supposed to be our tech night. So, yeah. So, anyway, so we did the Actors Workout Studio, and then everything that I produced pretty much up until they didn't get their lease renewed. I think in I'm trying to remember when it happened, but yeah. So, I did all 7 seasons of Play Noir there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we had a great relationship with Fran Montano. It was good. So.
Oh, because I spent 15 years in LA when I was an actor and did a lot of waiver theater, or it's not called waiver anymore. What's it called now?
99C.
And stuff like that. And so I'm familiar with, and I'm sure a lot are there and a lot have disappeared and all that.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate. We did the first year of the Los Angeles Collegiate Playwright Festival at the Lounge Theater over there at Vineland, and it's not Vineland, Gower and Vine, I think is what it was. And then we did the second year, we did the Los Angeles Collegiate Playwright Festival we did at the Complex. But I mean, everything, COVID killed everything, I live in the North Hollywood Arts District. It's not the North Hollywood Arts District anymore. I think a good 6 to 8 theaters have closed in that area. And then the Complex is closed. They were trying to get landmark status to where they could keep it open, but the congressperson who is working with them didn't get reelected. And so it's back to the drawing board. And so I don't know what happened, but, and then there's another gentleman, Gregory Crafts, who runs a production, runs a theater. He had Next Stage. I think it was Next Stage. And that's out in Koreatown. And I think the building sold or something like that, and they had it new, and they raised his rent like 700%, and it went to like $15,000 a month. And he's like, "I'm out," because they didn't want it to be a theater. So,
and it's not just LA. I mean, in Seattle, in Austin, everywhere, theaters are they're just disappearing. It's hard. It's a hard time right now.
It is, but hopefully things will turn around, and we, again, theater will always be here. All it takes was one actor and somebody to watch.
Yep.
Well, wonderful. Well, Allison, I really appreciate you coming on to the Playwright Spotlight.
Oh my gosh. I was delighted you asked me, and this was just completely enjoyable.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, until we see each other again, keep writing.